starting right straight up at noon, to our session 5 of Sterling's 2026 Summer Learning Series. I'm Laura McNeil. I am your delighted host. Unfortunately, next week is our last and final session of this learning series. We'd love to see you there as well. We will start this, however, with a recap from last week's session by Dr. Ala El-Hawagi. He did, his session was on competencies covering change management and adaptability. He started out with 2 brain tattoos, which I absolutely adored. So we'll start out our notes with those. Think big, start small, move fast. That's the first tattoo. Think big, start small, move fast. Secondly, he said you can never change anyone. You can only create an environment where they can see the value of changing it and doing it. For his material, I'll just recap very high level. We do have his notes out on the Sterling Council's website if you do want to go out and take a peek at the more granular level of detail. But what we covered was change management and adaptability matter. Almost 90% of all changes fail. What a change-ready culture looks like. We covered the fact that change helps organizations move faster than their competitors. That leadership is responsible for guiding the entirety of the organization through the change. It's not something leadership dictates. Leadership is responsible. We talked about how to build a change-ready culture using ADKAR. We talked about why people resist change. Dr. El-Hawagi also covered the 10 ways leaders accidentally create resistance, which I found quite insightful. We covered the technical and people sides of change, psychology or adaptability and mindset, leading with empathy and emotional intelligence. And then we concluded on your role as a leader, as a change leader. Of course, what's in it for me question came up in that discussion. And then lastly, Dr. El-Hawagi closed out with some information in regard to the Stanford psychologist, Carol Sweck. She has the GRIT principle, which covers growth mindset creates a love of learning. Resilience is a belief we can improve. And then the final message was great leaders help people see their own potential, build confidence, and inspire excellence. That is the foundation of a change-ready culture. So with that, let's move into this week's competency. And before I get into it, I just want to remind everyone we do source questions from the chat window. If you do have a question, please pop it into chat. We will be sourcing questions after our speaker concludes. This week's competency grouping is on crucial conversations and accountability. And it is my pleasure to announce that we have Monique Akanbi with us. Monique and I have worked together for decades as co-Sterling Master Examiners. Monique is SHRM Director of the Society of Human Resources and Management. She's a director there. She is also the host of Honest HR Podcast. So Monique, welcome to our summer learning series. And at this point, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Laura, and good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on what time zone you're on. But it is my pleasure to be here with you all today to talk about 2 areas for me that are very near and dear to my heart and that cannot go alone or stand alone. They go with each other. That is crucial conversations and accountability. And so hopefully for the next about 26 minutes of your life that you will not get back, you will take away a few nuggets that you can apply within your organization or even in your personal life. So we'll start with what makes a conversation crucial. We oftentimes have conversations, but there are certain conversations we have that we can easily say, that was a crucial conversation, or maybe there is a conversation that you need to have and you're avoiding having that conversation. And we'll talk about avoiding crucial conversations where you can identify, I'm avoiding this because I know this is going to impact maybe the relationship that I have with the individual or even my organization as well. So when we think about what is a crucial conversation, there are a few things that we think of. One, there's high stakes, right? So we have conversations with individuals all the time, but when we have a crucial conversation, we know that there are high stakes involved. Oftentimes, there are emotions that are involved. It could be compassion, it could be frustration, it could be disappointment. So there's a range of emotions that are involved that will constitute a crucial conversation. Oftentimes, there are opinion driven. As an individual, you have an opinion, or the other person that you're communicating with has an opinion about the topic that is at hand. And then ultimately, there is an income, there's an outcome, right? So there's this outcome impacting. So one way or another, it incites action. There is a result of that. And so there is a quote that where the author is unknown, but I love this quote, which is silence and avoidance never solve accountability problems. They multiply them. And I think about that even myself. I can think back to times where I identified a crucial conversation that I naturally shied away from just because I knew what was involved, whether that was emotionally or based on varying perspectives or opinions that I did not address. And so this is a moment of transparency. And guess what it did? It blew up. So silence does not help, especially in the area of having a crucial conversation or accountability. So as we take a deeper dive into having a crucial conversation, I want you to think about the conversations that you've had, or maybe a conversation you need to have, and where you fit on the spectrum of going from silence to violence. Oftentimes, we find ourselves either on one side of the spectrum, but what we really want to do, especially in high stress or highly emotional or high impacting situations, we want to be in the middle where we have a healthy response. So oftentimes you'll see violence, not in a physical way in a conversation, show up where the person may seem controlling, or maybe you're the controlling person, right? So sometimes when I have crucial conversations with my kids, I go to violence, right? I want to control, I want to dominate the conversation. Sometimes you see where there's labeling, where there's dismissing others with stereotypes, or even attacks on not attacking the person and not necessarily the issue. And then you have others that go to silence, that mask it, the everything's okay, it's fine. You've ever had a conversation with someone and the only response they have is, okay, that's fine. Or they're avoiding it. They know they need to have that conversation. That was me sometimes as well. Or you withdraw, you pull out of the conversation, you completely shut down. When there's violence or there's silence, nothing happens. There's no positive outcome. And what you want to do is choose awareness, choose courage, but also choose connection, and have that healthy dialogue in that conversation that you've identified as being crucial. So there's a couple of reasons why we avoid crucial conversations, and some of you may be able to identify yourselves in any of these 8 reasons. Maybe there's a fear of conflict. Maybe the person that you need to have the conversation with, it is going to take a lot of energy to have that conversation with them. Oftentimes, find individuals that have a desire to be liked, so we avoid the conversation, or we don't have what we identify as a crucial conversation. Sometimes we fear damaging the relationship. Maybe you have a relationship with an individual, and by having this conversation, you're not sure of the outcome of the continuation of the relationship that you've established with the individual. Sometimes there's fear of emotional reactions. There's a lack of confidence. Oftentimes in HR, I used to have to coach my people managers with having confidence and having these conversations with their employees and making sure that there are clear expectations. So sometimes we avoid crucial conversations because there's unclear expectations. There's past negative experiences. Maybe you've had a conversation with this person before, or you've had what you've identified as a crucial conversation and it didn't go so well. And so, based on past experience, you avoid those conversations. Or you have organizations, and unfortunately, this exists that have a culture that avoids candor, that has a culture that avoids speaking truth and being transparent, but speaking truth with heart. And so these are some of the common reasons why we avoid crucial conversations. Now that we've addressed why we avoid crucial conversations, I'm going to leave you with just a few tools that will help you. So I want you to think about maybe a conversation that you've had that you've identified as crucial, or a conversation that you need to have. And in the area of the conversation that you need to have, I want you to start with your heart. Focus on, what do you really want out of the conversation? What do you want for yourself? What do you want for the individual? Maybe what do you want for the organization? Next, I want you to learn to look for those cues and those signs. And I know in the world that we live in now, where oftentimes our interactions are virtual, just like here on Zoom. Look for those hidden cues, maybe in someone's body language, maybe in their tone. Look for those cues, and that'll give you insight as it relates to how you should have the conversation with the individual. I can't stress it enough to make it safe. Make it safe for the person to feel that I am not attacking you. I am really interested in a positive outcome, and I'm here to address a topic and not the person. So make it safe for the person to feel comfortable enough to share how they are really feeling, or their perspective in the conversation, because we know when there's conversations, there's varying perspectives. And so you want to make it safe and be open to the other person's perspective. And next, you want to master your stories. And mastering your stories, oftentimes we tell ourselves stories, right? So if you have, for example, an employee that has come to work and they historically haven't been late, but they've run late. You notice the pattern of them running late. Sometimes we tell a story of they don't care of the impact it has on the team by being late, or maybe they just, they're lazy. They don't want to come to work on time. But think about, those are stories we tell ourselves, but without having that conversation, maybe that person is dealing with maybe transportation issues. Maybe that person is dealing with issues at home where they're a caretaker for their parents and their children. And so that is causing them to be late to work. So we have to master our stories, and then state your path, right? Speak persuasively and not abrasively. What do you want the common goal to be? What do you want the outcome to be of the conversation? And then explore other paths. And when I say explore other paths, that is just empathy. Be open to the other person's perspective. And then once you've completed these 6 steps, move to action. What do you want to come? What is the outcome? What are the next steps? Gain mutual agreement when having a crucial conversation, when the stakes are high, but the impact is even greater if you don't have the conversation. Now, as we transition from crucial conversations to accountability, you can't hold someone accountable without first having the tools to have a conversation with them, or what you would identify as a crucial conversation. And so oftentimes accountability is used in a negative connotation. It's very punitive, right? So whenever you hear the word accountability or accountable, we often tense up, and that's because it's used in a punitive way. But think about accountability as a commitment, or the willingness to take responsibility either for your actions or for the other person to take responsibility for their actions, their decisions, and results, and to be answerable for them. There are 4 key components to accountability. One is, first and foremost, is ownership. Two is answerability. I am owning what I've committed myself to, and I am also making sure that I am answering to what I have committed to. I'm also being transparent in saying I may not be able to meet this commitment. I am struggling with this commitment. I'm having some challenges with this commitment, and then understanding that there are consequences, and those all consequences are not always negative, but there's an impact or an outcome to that, and that is consequences as it relates to accountability. So we look at accountability in two different ways. There's accountability and there's blame. When someone is holding themselves accountable, they're owning their actions and their decisions. They are learning from their mistakes. They're looking forward. They're focused on growth and improvement. Whereas blame is when they're stuck in the past or they're pointing fingers to each other. So it's really important to distinguish the difference between accountability and then blame. And there's three levels of accountability. First and foremost, we should always start with personal accountability. How do we hold ourselves accountable? How do we own our own results? Making sure that we are aware of our commitments and that we own what we've said or set out to do. Then there's team accountability, where you have a group of individuals that may be working on a project and need to hold themselves accountable. So how does the team support each other? How do you share responsibility on that task and that assignment? And then there's organizational accountability, which is how the organization operates. That's your systems, your structures. What are the cultural norms? Is it okay for me to say I made a mistake, to own it and to look at that mistake as a learning opportunity? Or do you have a culture where if a mistake is made, I'm not going to hold myself accountable because the last person I saw that owned up to their mistake the outcome wasn't so great. So, as a leader, your role in accountability is first and foremost to model it. We must first hold ourselves accountable. We must admit to our mistakes openly and then also follow through on our commitments. We should also expect accountability in terms of setting very clear standards and expectations. We must certainly address issues promptly and apply those consequences consistently and equitably across your organization or if your team, if you have a team of individuals. And then we should also support accountability by providing resources and training, remove any barriers to success that would that would prevent someone from holding themselves accountable, and then celebrate accountability behaviors as well. So, as we near the end of my time, the best leaders don't create followers. They create more leaders by holding people to their highest potential. And I can't talk about accountability, nor can I talk about crucial conversations without talking about psychological safety. And that is a series in its own self. But I wanted to share with you the accountability safety matrix. In this matrix that is displayed, it shows where in organizations or in situations where there's high safety and high accountability, that is where learning occurs. That is where growth happens. When there is low safety and high accountability, that is where anxiety and fear-based approaches come into play, right? And so you may be able to relate or identify situations where there was maybe high safety and low accountability, or high safety and high accountability, or low safety and low accountability, or low safety and high accountability. And so as we near, I want to leave you with your own personal action plan. One, accountability is about ownership. It is not about blame, and it's not punitive. It's crucial conversations require safety in order for it to be successful. Whenever you're having a crucial conversation or even holding someone accountable, start with the facts. Share your stories tentatively and allow the person the opportunity to share their perspective or share facts that they may want to have in that conversation. High accountability plus high safety equals high performance. And the conversation that you're avoiding is probably the one you most need to have. And so with that, I love to connect with you. I like to say thank you for this opportunity and turn it back over to you, Laura.
That was amazing. Thank you, Monique. I am going to go through these notes that I'm still typing up. I hope I got everything,
Hmm.
but you covered so much in such a short period of time, and I thought it was very well done, very crisp. So let me know if I've missed anything. Crucial conversations are defined by high stakes, strong emotions, and differing opinions, making them both challenging and deeply impactful. And then you pointed out the quote, silence and avoidance never solve accountability problems, they multiply them. You
Hmm.
covered the fight or flight responses with violence and silence as the bookends, and healthy response in the middle with the choice of awareness, courage, and connection as crucial. You covered the 7 skills of crucial conversations. Start with heart, learn to look, make it safe, master your story, state your path, explore others' paths, and then move to action. I
Hmm.
think the overarching message there was to emphasize the need for applying diverse voices,
Hmm.
expanding access to ideas, and inspiring change, therefore reinforcing that broader purpose behind developing strong communication and accountability skills. And then you covered the key components of accountability: ownership, answerability, transparency, and consequences. We talked about the 3 levels of accountability being personal, team, and organizational, and the comfort zone, learning zone, apathy zone, anxiety zone, where the greatest amount of growth is in that learning zone. Um, but building team accountability requires shared norms and um, visible expectations, normalized crucial conversations, including regular practice, right? And building relationships, I would say. And then lastly, you close with the safety, accountability, safety metrics matrix, which was like a high-low matrix. Love that.
Hmm.
It really emphasizes the fact that crucial conversations only are effective if you have a high degree of safety and a high degree of accountability. Those 2 components are essential. And then I have, as a takeaway, the best leaders don't create followers, they create more leaders by holding people to their accountable to their highest potential. Did I get it right? That was a lot you covered in
You
a short.
got it right. I know. Sorry.
No, it
Yes.
was good. It was good. I cheated a little because I got your deck ahead of time, so I was able to
It's okay.
visualize some of these things. But now, when you went over it, I was trying to, embody all of it in here.
Yes.
Start with a question. How do you recommend leaders balance accountability with psychological safety when team members have very different communication styles or cultural beliefs and backgrounds?
So, psychological safety should never be a negotiable. It should always be a non-negotiable, right? If we think about ourselves, how we want to feel, and one of the beauties is that we all have diverse backgrounds, experiences, and forms of thoughts as well. And so it's not a matter of balancing psychological safety because that is your anchor. You should actually start with creating a space where individuals feel safe enough to share how they feel or share their perspective, but in a healthy way. Because oftentimes, and I think about the time where there was this boom of we want people to show up as themselves at work, right? You heard there was this, and being in HR, we would hear this all the time. I would hear leaders say, I just want my employees to show up as themselves. And then they showed up as themselves, and then they thought, well, show up as
Maybe
yourself, but not that part, right? And so, so you want to make sure that you create a space where others can feel or feel that they can share their perspective, but in a very healthy way, with the goal of moving towards what is the outcome, what's a positive outcome. So start with psychological safety. That should never be a non-negotiable. And psychological safety looks different for every person. So that's probably one of the biggest challenges is how to balance what does that look like for each person. But I think creating consensus on what is allowed and what's not allowed, what's tolerated and what's not tolerated creates that space.
Okay, very good. And I think if I remember correctly, we had programs called Be Authentic, bring your authentic
Mhm.
self to work, right? And then we're like, oh, well, maybe not that
We
authentic.
don't want
But you
that.
told us to. Right,
Yes.
exactly. It creates a little bit of a quandary there. Could you please share a real world example where a crucial conversation actually transformed a team's performance or culture, and what specifically about that made it successful?
Oh, so one of these days I'm going to write a book, especially being in HR. I mean, I have tons and tons of stories, so I can pull from many of them. But what I think about when this story I think about is there was a time where I was mediating a conversation between an employee and her manager. And they tried to resolve the issue on their own. And we got to the point where, okay, we need to bring HR in just to mediate the conversation. And so, for about 15 minutes, in the first 15 minutes into that conversation, there was just nothing but blame. I mean, blame coming from both ends. And so everything the employee said was scrutinized, everything the manager said was scrutinized. And so I tried to let them work it out themselves. And I said, we're not going to get anywhere if we don't address the root of the issue. And so I knew I had to insert myself in that conversation and go out on a limb, right? And it could have ended up with egg. I could have ended up with egg on my face, but I asked. I said, "Is it safe to say neither one of you trust each other?" And oh my gosh, I used the big T word, and they looked at me like a deer in the headlights. And they both looked and they had to be honest with themselves. And so they both answered. It took them some time, and they both answered, yes, I don't trust her. They neither one of them trust each other. And so once we got past the trust, right? Because we know if you don't trust someone, anything they say, you're going to analyze it, you're going to tell yourself a story. If they say the sky is blue and you know the sky is blue, but you don't trust them, you're going to question if the sky is blue. And so once we were able to move past that, they were able to have a really healthy conversation and then walk away with an agreement on how they would interact with each other, which ultimately impacted the team because the team saw the tension. They felt the tension between the two of them. But it was a matter of addressing something that was uncomfortable. Neither one of them were going to say, I don't trust you. That's hard to say to someone, I don't trust you. But being able to kind of put it out there and both of them own it was allowed them to be able to move forward.
That's such a hard thing. Not bad, that
It
was the
is,
wrong word, but
it's,
it's such a
yeah,
hard
I
thing
know.
because honestly, trust, if you don't have a foundation built on trust, there's so much that can go wrong,
Hmm.
and I feel like trust is built over time through
Yeah.
consistency and systematic experience. And a lot of these people challenges, and you're the HR expert, a lot of the people challenges, I believe, are process indicators
Hmm.
that the
Hmm. Oh,
process
yeah.
isn't well defined, it's not systematic. So if people are focusing on each other more and blaming, like you said in that example, as opposed to what can we do to fix the system that we're working with. And a system doesn't mean a tool or a application that you run on your
Right.
desktop. It means how our factory floor, how we work together. So that's
Hmm.
really interesting because to me, crucial conversations and those things that you talked about come back to the way we work and how we
Yeah.
operate. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's really, really insightful. Thank you for sharing that example. All right, we
Hmm.
have 2 minutes left, Monique. So I have one
Okay.
more question. What are the most common mistakes that you think leaders make when they try to hold other people accountable? And how can they avoid falling into those patterns?
So I'll say there's two common mistakes. One, waiting too long. They wait too long to address a behavior or address a pattern. But then also, we often associate, and I said this earlier, with accountability being punitive. And so, what if we shift our mindset to saying, Me holding you accountable is not to punish you, but it's because I am committed to your growth. I'm committed to your success. I'm committed to the team's growth and the team's success. I'm committed to the organization's growth and the organization's success. And because I'm committed, I must hold myself and you accountable. If we shift the our mindset around accountability being punitive versus being something that really is, it's a gift, right? It's a gift. I surround myself with people that are going to tell me not what I want to hear, but what I need to hear. And so one is shifting the mindset of thinking of accountability as being punitive to being thought of as me being committed to your success, my success, and ultimately the organization's success. And when I see you going down the wrong path, when I see actions or behaviors that are contrary to that commitment, then we need to have that conversation, which is accountability.
Yeah, those were really, really good points. Yes, and that goes back to that matrix, high accountability,
Hmm.
high
Yes.
level of safety. And I think people can take accountability a lot when they realize that it's their job and they're accountable for these things. They can take that more seriously and less personally,
Yeah.
perhaps. All right. Well, we are out of time. I want to thank everyone for joining. Monique, thank you so much for coming and joining us today and imparting these wonderful words of wisdom on us. I do want to remind everyone next Wednesday is